Hi everyone. I'm still coming to you from home just for the next 2 days. Even though I'm fine now, I tested negative for COVID. Um, According to the rules, I still have to stay gone after a 10-day quarantine, so that puts me at Thursday. So I will see you all in person on Thursday with a mask, of course. But I just wanted to remind all of you this picture kind of came up on my news feed again, and I wanted to share it with all of you. Just remember, guys, even though these times are weird that we are living in, after the plague came the Renaissance. Something good is going to be reborn after all of this, and something is going to shift majorly. Or at least, fingers crossed, that's what I'm hoping for. Anyway, last week, you guys got a glimpse at some Renaissance art, Italian Renaissance art. And I told you that the Renaissance spread north. It leaves Italy. I mean, it never leaves Italy, but it travels north from Italy and into this sort of weird part. If you guys look up north of Italy, that kind of crazy splattery part with, that looks like a jigsaw puzzle. That's the Holy Roman Empire. And today there are different countries that make it up, like the Netherlands and Belgium, Germany, Poland, the Czech Republic, Austria, Hungary, Switzerland, a whole bunch of countries make it up. But at the time, it was a big mess, as you guys can see. But one thing that kind of does unify it is they did speak, most of those countries did speak some form of Germanic language, something like that. And this kind of brings them all together. The other thing that ties all these people together, even though they are all in different kingdoms, is of course religion, right? They're all Catholic. All of Europe at this point, for the most part, is Catholic. And the Catholic Church is settled right there in Rome, right? Italy is the center of Catholicism because that's where the Pope lives. And that's where Rome is, which is where Christianity became the official religion in the first place. So the thing is, though, as the Renaissance travels north, it's going to take on a whole new look, a very different appearance. So this is where we're going to be looking at the Northern Renaissance. And the Northern Renaissance and the Italian Renaissance, they happen around the same time, or they do happen at the same time. They just have slightly different characteristics, yet it is also a Renaissance in its own right. And you got to keep that in mind that people in the north of Europe, they lived in a different world. They didn't live in Italy, and they have different values. They experience the world differently. So their art is going to reflect that, of course. Remember that in Italy, the change that we see in art, in culture, in politics, all of these things are inspired by humanism with an emphasis on the revival of classical antiquity, right? Like the Greeks and the Romans, and the emphasis on the Greek and Roman views of politics, a republic, democracy, the questioning of God in politics and stuff like that. Also, we see, of course, how it's reflected in art as well, with the emphasis on the classics and the human form and all of that. This is the human form, remember, is like the main form of expression in Italian Renaissance art. That's why there's so much nudity in Italian Renaissance art. You're not going to see a whole lot of that in the Northern Renaissance, in Northern Europe. They had slightly different values than the Italians, and they, I guess you could say, were a little bit more prudish about that kind of thing. In Northern Europe, change was coming, but it was not driven by a sudden obsession with Greek and Roman values. Instead, in Northern Europe, people were driven by religious reform. Many people in Northern Europe really felt that the Catholic Church had lost its way and had become something it was never meant to be. For example, the original Christians of Europe were poor. They were not supposed to be the elites of Europe, and they were supposed to help those who were less fortunate. And those that worked in the church often were meant to take vows of poverty and live simple lives. Well, one look at the Vatican, and you know that that's not what's happening, right? Many people in Northern Europe who they paid taxes to the church, they really felt that the Catholic Church had become something else, not what they thought the leader of the Christian church should be. And they didn't like that. They were turned off by a lot of the things that the church was at the time doing. Remember that even the Pope at the time, Pope Julius, had raised an army and gone to war. Many people in Northern Europe, they just think like, that's not what the Pope is supposed to do. That's not what the leader of our religion is supposed to do. So they start to revolt against the authority of the Catholic Church. And they really want to return to original, simple Christian values. So while you do see some displays of classical antiquity like Greek and Roman mythology in Northern Renaissance art, that's not the main theme. You're instead going to see a theme like of sort of a return to classical and simple values of Christianity. So in Christianity, I'm sorry, in the Northern Renaissance, the art is going to be more religious, a lot more emotional as well. There's a lot of like emotion and tragedy and drama in the art as well. And whereas the Italians depicted beauty and truth as the human form in all its glory, Northerners don't do that. Instead, the way that they depict beauty is by great attention to detail. In other words, they try to imitate nature almost with a photographic like copy in how they paint. And you guys will see what I mean in just a bit. But obviously, cameras had not been invented back then, and it wasn't even an idea yet. But if somebody were to like have a time machine and take a camera back there, the photograph would actually rival the work of the great masters of the Northern Renaissance at the time, because the painters of the Northern Renaissance were so like deliberate in their attention to detail that you're going to be amazed by what they did and how they painted exactly what they saw in the greatest detail. So the other thing too is that many of the ideas of the Northern Renaissance about returning to these old original Christian values, they spread very quickly throughout the northern part of Europe. And this is because of the invention of the printing press. This is a huge moment in European history. The printing press was invented. I mean, if you can think about anything else that rivals the printing press for the spread of information, the internet maybe. I mean, this was sort of like the 1500s version of the invention of the internet. This is how information and ideas were spread, was through the printed word. So these ideas about church reform are going to spread. And we're going to get to the most important part that this is leading to in the next chapter when we learn about something called the Reformation. Okay, now in Northern Renaissance art, the characteristics are these. So if you're writing down notes, these are the characteristics you want to keep in mind. First of all, in Northern Renaissance art, there is major, major, major attention to detail. They are incredibly detailed down to the smallest, tiniest thing, and very realistic looking. This is how they depict truth and beauty. Remember that the Renaissance was all about depicting truth, and truth was beauty. Well, in Italy, they depicted truth in the human form, and in the Northern Renaissance, it's in their attention to detail, in making things look as realistic as they possibly can. So very real, very realistic. There's a major tendency toward realism, and also naturalism. In other words, showing people as they really are. The Northerners did not try to depict the human form as the classical ideal, or as this, the great Roman gods and goddesses with the perfect bodies. They actually showed people as they normally really were. There's also a great interest in painting landscapes, so they painted more of the natural world around them. They also often painted middle class and sometimes even peasant life, whereas in the Italian Renaissance, they mostly just painted the elite and the wealthy. In the Northern Renaissance, you're going to see an emphasis on regular, everyday people as well. The Northerners were very proud of the inside of their houses. In fact, the Dutch were incredibly proud of how they decorated their homes, and they kept them spotlessly clean. That was a point of pride. And that was actually how they showed off their wealth and their privilege, was by showing the inside of their houses. So we're going to see a lot of details of domestic interiors, like the inside of a home. A lot of portraits, of course. That actually is something they have in common with the Italian Renaissance. So great skill in how they drew portraits. And also, like I said before, religious, emotional, and very simplistic Christian themes. So let's take a look at other ways that the Renaissance spread as well. First of all, the Renaissance also, this was in your Humanism web quest, the Renaissance also was the beginning of music as a true form of art. We can totally relate to that today. If you're a fan of music, you know that musicians actually call themselves artists for a reason. Music is a form of art. It wasn't always. Remember that music used to be something that you just did at church, or sometimes you did at festivities, but music still had a very religious theme to it. In the Renaissance, we start to see the beginning of music as a source of poetry set to melodies, and music that was more for fun or for romance or love. This changes the composition of, for example, Catholic Mass, Catholic Church, right? Mass is what Catholics call their church services. They changed music to, instead of just like chanting, that is something that the monks and the nuns used to do, they started to set religious songs to secular tunes, to secular melodies that had already been written. And that's kind of how music was born. This is how music became more modern. And then something that Northgate can relate to as well. Some of the types of songs that they sang were things like the madrigal, which is a poem that is set to music. And it's in the vernacular, not in Latin like it would have been in church. Okay, so now let's take a look at the Northern Renaissance art as well as we're moving on. So one of the most famous Northern Renaissance artists was actually a Dutch painter by the name of Jan van Eyck. And he painted this portrait called Giovanni Arnolfini and His Bride. Maybe you've seen this before. This is actually a pretty famous painting, and it is a Renaissance painting. It's a Northern Renaissance painting, but painted by a Dutch painter. However, this is a painting of an Italian merchant and his bride. Now, a lot of people think they understand what's going on in this painting, but there are so many hidden clues and secrets about this. Also, by the way, you can always tell you're looking at a Jan van Eyck painting when everybody in the painting, their face just looks like Vladimir Putin. I don't know if you can notice that, but they all look like Putin to me. All right, so Northern painters like Van Eyck, they take great care in depicting every single object in the room, and they became masters at rendering like details. The emphasis on like the realistic portrayal is something that is really, really evident in this painting, and I'm going to zoom in so you guys can see. This is a portrait of Giovanni Arnolfini. Like I said, he's an Italian merchant who settled in Bruges, which is today in Belgium, and his wife, Giovanna Senami. Now, a lot of people think that she is pregnant, but actually, it's actually the way she's holding her dresses. And she's doing that in a way to show off her wealth, how much fabric her dress has. And that, since fabric at the time was expensive, that's a way of showing off their wealth. Another way of showing off their wealth is showing all the stuff they have in their house. Look at behind them. They have a golden chandelier. They have a pet dog. They have a bed that has all these that has all this bedding. It's like one of those 4-poster beds. It's very luxurious. They have a mirror and all this other stuff in their house. By the way, fun fact about dogs. Dogs are often put in paintings to symbolize faith or loyalty, since dogs are so loyal. Now, this is showing him and his bride, since it's supposedly they just got married. It's doubtful that she is that pregnant. So that's why many people say that that's just the way she's holding her dress. Now, about this attention to detail, let me zoom in and show you what I'm talking about. Here's a more up-close picture. Now you can see that obviously every little detail in the painting is paid attention to. Look at the rug down behind the bride's green dress. Every little square in the rug is painted. The bride's fabric, every fold, every stitch is detailed. Also, both of them are wearing fur. I mean, you probably didn't notice that before, but they're both wearing like some sort of fur trim on their clothing. She has it here in the white, and then he has it kind of all around. And if you get up really close, you can see, every like hair of fur is actually painted. I'll get up even closer so you can really see what I'm talking about. But here behind them, bet you didn't see this before. I'll go back again. This is the mirror that is behind them. Take a look here. This is an interesting detail that the artist puts in here. First, you can see the light perfectly reflecting from the window off of the gold chandelier. But in the mirror behind them, you can actually see that the artists painted them from behind as they would have been reflected in that mirror. And it's a round mirror, and it's them actually posing for the painting. And very cleverly, the painter even put himself in that reflection since he would have been reflected in that painting as well. But take a look at the reflection. You can even see like the open window, and everything that was reflected in that mirror is in that. So it's like an image within an image. This was a clever way that artists often showed off their skill. You'll also notice that in the mirror, all around it, are um, tiny paintings. Those are all scenes from the Bible. So this is probably a very expensive mirror that they received. The mirror itself, hanging on the wall, has about 12 different scenes from the Bible in those little circles around it. I'll get up even closer. Here you can see, once again, take a look at the exquisite detail in the painting, the stones and the way they shimmer all around, the paintings, the 12 biblical scenes in each circle around the painting itself, even the necklace and the beads that are hanging next to it. And then, of course, you can see Giovanni Arnolfini and his bride with the painter himself right there is painting them. You even see the open window and the light coming through and hitting the chandelier perfectly. You guys see what I mean now by photographic perfection. There were no photographs or cameras back then, but this is a pretty close substitute for what they were able to do. All right, now here's another example of Northern Renaissance art. Again, this is a religious theme, as you can tell. Northern Renaissance artists also like to play with the sort of shape of the canvas, so they didn't always paint in perfect circular or square or rectangular canvases. As you can see, this is actually sort of an upside-down T-shaped painting. It's called The Deposition by another Dutch artist named Roger van der Weyden. And this is a scene in which Jesus Christ is being taken down from the cross after having died on the cross. And he is surrounded by his family and other mourners and followers who are, of course, mourning his death. In the blue, once again, is Mary, his mother, who has fainted at the sight of her son's body. Now, again, take a look here. Okay, she's always in blue. But one thing you'll notice though, is that all of these people are depicted wearing clothing that was typical of the Netherlands back then. So they are not dressed as they would have been dressed in Roman times or biblical times. You'll also notice a little detail here is a skull. Keep that in mind. I'm going to talk about skulls in just a second, but they are often used in Dutch or Northern Renaissance art as well. Here is an up close zoom in of Mary and her sister Anne, who is another one of the mourners at the cross. Take a look at the tears falling on Mary's face. Her skin is very pale. The wrinkles, even the dark circles under her eyes that show that she has been crying. You just see the anguish and desperation and the sadness on her face, as well as Saint Anne, who is Mary's sister. And you see her, even the detail to like the trim on her sleeve, the way that the pin that is holding her veil together, the tears as they fall down her face, and how you can even see that her skin has turned and her nose have turned red from crying. Here's another really great painting. This is, again, a portrait. This is a self-portrait by Albrecht Dürer. He's a Dutch Renaissance painter as well. And he painted this self-portrait of himself. Now, you'll also notice that he actually presents himself sort of as a Christ-like figure. He sort of looks like what many people imagine Jesus Christ to look like. So even though it's a secular painting, because it's a self-portrait of the artist, it's meant to remind the viewer of Jesus Christ anyway. But take a look at the attention to detail as well. First of all, you see a little bit of influence of the Italians because it's a triangular shape. You know how they like that symmetry. Take a look at the detail on the fur trim, the shininess of the curly hair, the lines on his face, and the fur trim that even catches the light perfectly, even the veins and the fingernails on his hand. Now here's another example of Northern Renaissance art. Here's what we mean by attention to detail, intricate attention to detail. This painting is called The Virgin and the Chancellor Roland. You can find it today in the Louvre in Paris. So this is once again depicting the Virgin Mary, even though she's not in blue this time. She wasn't in blue always, but here she is in a red robe. And she is holding baby Jesus. And there's an angel with rainbow iridescent wings about to crown her with this magnificent detailed crown, since she was technically the Queen of Heaven. Here, Chancellor Roland is praying. He has his hands in prayer as he is talking to her, probably blessing the child. And then even the book is open, and you can even see if you get really close, you can see the writing and the images on the book, which is probably the Bible. But take a look at everything else, though. The domestic interior, the Roman arches, even the detail in the arches all over them, the detail in the stained glass window, the detail in the robe, the detail in the floor tiles, and then even in the background back there, and in all the other windows in the background as well. This is what we mean by, exquisite attention to detail. That the way that they depicted beauty was in trying to imitate the world as it really was, including, the man-made world, right? The inside of a home or the inside of a palace in this case. Here's another one. This is an interesting piece. This is called Adoration of the Lamb, or also known as the Ghent altarpiece in 1432, also by Jan van Eyck. So this is showing, of course, Jesus in heaven. He's on a throne, surrounded on either side by Mary and Joseph. And then there are medieval and biblical scenes down here. On either side are saints and angels. And then on the very ends here are Adam and Eve, okay, the first man and the first woman. But notice their bodies, even though they are depicted in the nude because Adam and Eve were naked, the bodies are not the same as the ideal Roman Greek statues, right? They're not these buff, perfect looking bodies. They're actually depicted as like what normal looking bodies would have been like. This is called a triptych, meaning that it's three pieces and they fold in like they're hinged on either side. An interesting side note about this painting, it was actually stolen by the Nazis during World War II, and it was rescued by a group of American and British soldiers before it was destroyed in a cave that the Nazis had hidden it, and it is now back in its rightful location. They made a movie about that, by the way. It's called The Monuments Men. I don't know if you've ever seen that. Okay, next one. Here is another great painting. This is by Quentin Matsys. It's called The Moneylender and His Wife. And this is also in the Louvre as well. Take a look at this detail as well. This shows, of course, a married couple. They're counting and weighing some money. But let me get up close so you guys can see what I mean by this. But take a look here. You can see the folds of her dress, and in his hat, the things that are resting on the shelves. This was like very normal. They often like to show people's material possessions in paintings. You can even see like the door in the background is cracked open a little bit and see into the back room, which appears to be some sort of kitchen. And then everything on the table. Let me zoom in there. This is where the wife is reading a book. It appears, and you can even see like letters, and you can see the upside down, how we would have perceived it. It's supposed to make you feel like you're sitting at the desk with them, across from them. Here's the book that she's reading. It appears to be the Bible or some sort of religious book, with even like the detail in the bindings, along with some sort of a shiny mirror that is actually reflecting what is behind you. This guy right here in the red hat, who's kind of got his hand up to the window, is supposedly the person sitting in front of the moneylender and his wife. Technically, that's supposed to be you, the viewer, but you are supposed to feel like you're in the painting as well. So you are reflected in here. You can even see the window, which catches the light, and even what's outside the window, which appears to be like a church steeple. Like absolute attention to detail. Look at the coins. Every single coin stamped perfectly. The shininess of the pearls, the way the gold and the pearls and the coins catch the light. Even the jewelry that the moneylender is wearing, and even like the dirt under his fingernails, is depicted as well. All right, this is one of my favorites as well. This is known as The Ambassadors by Hans Holbein the Younger in 1533. And this is actually depicting two wealthy men. They're ambassadors, so they're probably very international. They probably are well-traveled, well-educated, wealthy men. Perhaps they are brothers. This was a very typical way to do a portrait in the Northern Renaissance. Was they like to be depicted with their material possessions as a way to show off their wealth. So here you see, of course, like the great attention to detail in their fur trim. A lot of, as you can see, wealthy people obviously wore fur. Their robes, the silk shirt, the jewelry that they are wearing, the intricate pattern in the curtains behind them, the tile on the floor down here. And then you can see that they are likely very educated men because they've got a globe and he's holding a telescope, a musical instrument, some books, various things that seem to show like navigation tools. So these obviously are things that show that these men travel quite a bit and are obviously wealthy and educated. But one of the most fascinating things about this painting is the memento mori, or some people call it a vanitas. Can you spot it? Do you see anything in this painting that looks unusual to you? Now remember, I told you that there was a skull in one of the previous pictures, and skulls are kind of a thing that you see a lot in especially Northern Renaissance art, but you can see it in just about any piece in art from any era. You might notice that then there is a skull right here, and it's painted like flattened and on a plane, right, like diagonal. Maybe you guys can see my cursor right here. This is a skull, and a lot of people think like, wait, what? Is that actually part of the painting, or is that a computer glitch? Is that real? Yes, it's real. That's actually how Hans Holbein the Younger painted it. He meant to paint it sort of as hidden and kind of on a plane, so as to not be quite sitting there like as part of the three-dimensional skull, but still sort of in a way kind of hide it in the painting. Sometimes they were hidden, sometimes they were much more pronounced, or they were simply part of the scenery. What this is you will often find a skull or a memento mori in a painting. Sometimes they're also called vanitas, which means vanity. And what this is meant to symbolize, of course, is just that. Memento mori is Latin, which means remember that you will die. I know that sounds really harsh, but that's what it actually means, to remember that your own mortality. Or it's, like I said, vanitas also means vanity. In other words, artists would often put a skull as a reminder to you that you might have a lot of wealth in this world, but you cannot take it with you. It's a reminder to stay humble, and that your wealth does not define who you are as a person, because in the end, everybody ends up buried 6 feet under in a similar coffin, right? So while wealthy people of the Renaissance, they love to depict their wealth and their power and their privilege, artists often found a way to sneak this in as sort of just a reminder that, hey, wealth doesn't mean immortality. You're going to die too, just like anybody else. So sometimes it's a skull. Usually it's a skull. Sometimes it's a soap bubble, like, because a soap bubble just pops and it's gone. Like life, I guess you could say, right? That's how many artists saw it at the time, that life could be short and fleeting. Here 1 second, gone the next. You guys might see these throughout the year in art. And if you ever go to a museum, you might see sometimes things like soap bubbles or skulls, kind of embedded or hidden in a painting. Okay, so here's your homework, classwork/homework. Okay, guys, you have a Renaissance gallery walk posted in Google Classroom. You have 2 things. You have a slideshow, which is a slide of many different paintings from the Renaissance. Some of them I have already shown you. Some of them you haven't seen yet. And then you have a Google Doc with a list. What I want you guys to do is to look at the paintings, and then in the corresponding list, you're going to explain what makes each piece of art a Renaissance masterpiece. Okay? So for each painting, you're going to tell me what are the characteristics that make this a Renaissance painting. But don't just give me like a laundry list of generic terms. I want you to actually tell me, how do you know this is a Renaissance painting? What is it about the painting that is a Renaissance characteristic? Okay, so this will be due tomorrow on Google Classroom. If you have time, you can work on it now. or you can work with a partner if you like. But that's your homework as well, is to finish the Renaissance Gallery walk. So if you guys have any questions though, feel free to email me. I did update grades, so please let me know if you have any questions about that as well. And I can't wait to see you guys on Thursday. I will see you soon.